So I've been trying to figure out problem solving strategies that will help my students for a while. I've really been doing a lot of research, a lot of digging around, trying to find things that are really helpful, but things that are easy for students to do on their own too. One of the strategies that I've really found that I've really liked and used with my students and have seen a lot of great outcomes from that is something called the numberless word problem. So the idea is you take a word problem like this fourth grade word problem that I did with my students today, and we're going to take the numbers out of it. And it helps students have a better understanding of what's happening, the context of the problem. So let's not worry about the numbers yet, especially when those numbers are fractions, because some of our students who are still trying to become better problem solvers, they'll see those fractions and they'll start to panic and get so frustrated and worried about those fractions that they won't be able to solve the problem. So the first thing that we do is we take the numbers out altogether. Now, I just took some post-it, little piece of post-it note, and I just covered those up today. So when I introduced this problem to my students, I introduced it like this. I didn't even show them the fractions at first. And we just talked about the problem and what's happening in the problem. And we talked about the fact that there's this main street and it's so many miles long, we don't even know how many miles yet. And they're painting it and they've already painted a certain part of that. We still don't know what that part is. And now we're trying to figure out how much of it is left to paint. And we start to talk about it. And I encourage kids to draw pictures or draw some models. Think about problems that you've had that have been like this before, and how did you solve those problems before? And we had a great conversation about the fact that what we're doing is basically a part whole. We know the whole. The whole is how many miles long is the stretch of road that they need to paint. And we have a part because the part is what they've already painted. And the other part is going to be what's left to paint. From that, we talked about, well, what does that usually look like? If we put in any old numbers, if we put in some whole numbers, what would we be doing? What operation would we be doing? And the conversation very quickly moved to, we'd be subtracting here. So then I tell my students, all right, let's just pick some whole numbers. Let's not get panicked and worried about the fractions yet. Let's pick some whole numbers and put some whole numbers in here. So let's pretend that they've already painted 3 miles and that the stretch that they have to paint is 10 miles. And we start to talk about, what would we do there? Well, this is just like a problem that we had before in some way, shape, or form. Students are going to see that part whole. Now we have 10 miles and we're going to take away the 3 miles that they've already painted to find out how many miles are left. And once you say that word takeaway and we get to that takeaway idea, students are going to quickly see that this is still a subtraction problem. And then we'll talk about, okay, so 10 minus 3 would be 7 and they'd have 7 miles left to paint. So now that we feel really good about that, now we're going to go back to what was the original problem. And we're going to talk about if the stretch of road that they need to paint of Main Street is 8/10 of a mile, and I need to take 4/10 away, well, it's still a subtraction problem. It's still a part whole that we're trying to solve. And from there, students can see, okay, I need to subtract 8/10 minus 4/10. From there, students are at different places with their fraction understanding. Some of my students might have to build a model with some fraction tiles. Some are ready to just go and solve that with paper and pencil algorithm. It's a great strategy though, because it helps students not get so worried about the fractions and just think about the context of the problem. And like I said, we really talk about what's happening in the problem before I even introduce numbers. Then I introduce it with whole numbers, and then we finally get to the fractions. And at that point, the anxiety level is usually pretty low and kids are able to attack the problem. I love the numberless word problems. It really helps students take a step back and start to think about attacking the problem and not worry so much about the numbers.